Opportunity to welcome you to our portfolio committee meeting on agriculture, land reform and rural development on this beautiful Friday morning when we are witnessing the first cold front of the winter season. I hope you have your thick jackets all pulled out and you are wearing your entire wardrobe right through this winter. Let me also take the opportunity to welcome the executive in the ministry, the Honorable Deputy Minister Umamukapa Nyawoza. I will also take the opportunity to welcoming the DG of the department, Ntate Ramasodi, and officials of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Honorable members, allow me to welcome also the two entities being the Land Bank and the IDC. We would like to welcome the leadership and the officials of Land Bank and the IDC and all our guests that are here this morning. Goeiemorgen, good morning, Dumelang, Sanibonani, Thobela, Molweni. Let us, honorable members, welcome therefore the Deputy Minister for opening remarks or the DG of the department before we hand over to the Land Bank. Mamukapa. DM Kapa.
DM Kapa, apologize to the chair.
Apologize to the course. No, move on to the department. Tate Ramasodi, any opening remarks on your side as the department before we hand over to the Land Bank?
No, Chair. Good morning. And on a cold day in Cape Town, we are okay. We will be joining our colleagues in terms of responding to the issues that will be coming through from the presentations. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you.
I think, Chair, you are frozen.
Honorable members, it looks like the chair is having a challenge. Can we then allow the Land Bank in the meantime to take us through the presentations as the chair tries to join?
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. My name is Thabi Nkosi. I am the Chairman of the Land Bank's Board of Directors. This morning from the Land Bank, I am joined by Mr. Themba Rikhotso, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Land Bank. I'm also joined by Ms. Kensani Mukari, the Chief Financial Officer, as well as Mr. Sydney Soundi, who is responsible for strategy as well as overseeing the corporate and development business banking function within the Land Bank. We are also joined by Mr. Lefense Radikeledi from the National Treasury. Honorable members, we have prepared a detailed presentation which we circulated yesterday. With your indulgence, Chair, I would like to just take members through it briefly. If we can put it in presentation mode, please. Thank you. So, honorable members, we were requested to present to the committee this morning details on a number of financial instruments that entail partnerships between the Land Bank and the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. We have also taken the liberty, honorable members, to also provide detail regarding the current state of the Land Bank, as well as details regarding our strategic direction following the difficulties that the entity has been facing. And we thought that this might provide helpful context for honourable members, as it has been some time since the Land Bank last engaged with the committee. Please scroll forward, Sydney. These are the instruments on the previous slide that we will be taking members through. We'll also be giving detail regarding the Agro Energy Fund that was discussed by Minister Didiza a few days ago in this House. Next slide, please. 2 slides on. Next slide. Thank you. So on this slide, honourable members, we really just give highlights of the current state of the bank. As members are aware, in previous periods, the Land Bank had faced significant difficulties. In 2020, the bank defaulted on its liabilities. At that point, lending activities were also halted. At that point, the Auditor General had also raised some serious concerns regarding internal controls and governance within the entity. We also had quite a difficulty in terms of retaining our critical employees. So it was a very, very challenging period in the Land Bank's history. I am happy to report, however, that since 2021, with the support of the National Treasury, the Minister of Finance, as well as Minister Didiza and her department, we have made significant progress in a number of areas. The first area, of course, being on the financial discipline perspective, where we are now in a very healthy solvency position. We also have reported for the previous 2 financial years a positive profit, and we are on positive terrain in that sense. We have also been quite conscientious in terms of how we execute on client collections, and this has really helped us to bolster our cash position and really be able to reduce some of the debt that was outstanding in 2020. We've also, as members are aware, that previously much of the Land Bank's loan book was externally managed by intermediaries. We have undertaken an exercise to insource the bulk of this loan book, and this has really enabled us to exercise greater control over the loan book and also save in terms of the administrative costs that we were paying to these intermediary partners. This allows us to really better manage the direction of the loan book from a strategic perspective. We have also, honourable members, resumed all lending activities, both on the commercial and developmental side. In 2022, October, we launched the Blended Finance Scheme in partnership with the Department of Agriculture.
Recording in progress.
We will be discussing progress in terms of this scheme later in the presentation, but we really have seen significant interest, and this has really bolstered our resolve to really accelerate the work that we are doing in terms of the strategic repositioning of the bank. We've also, from the original position where we were since the default, we've managed to reduce our liabilities quite significantly, almost by half, and we are contemplating yet another capital reduction in the coming weeks. So this will significantly bring our debt down from where it was in 2020. The other point that we really focused on as a board when we were appointed at the end of 2021 was really the rebuilding of the bank's reputation. Because of the difficulties that the bank had experienced, we had lost a lot of trust in the market, and we've really been on a drive to rebuild this trust through consistent delivery and really engaging and coming much closer to our stakeholders and our clients as well. Next slide, please, Cindy. On the governance and internal control side, for the last financial year, we're quite happy to report that we are one of the only state-owned entities to report a clean audit outcome from the Auditor General. And this is really the outcome of significant effort from the CFO and her team, and with the support of the Auditor General. And so this is really, really speaks to the interventions that we have put in place in terms of really strengthening governance and internal control within the bank. From a leadership perspective, as members may be aware, the Land Bank's previous CEO left the bank in the first quarter of the previous year. We have since appointed Mr. Themba Rikotso, who is the bank's new CEO. He started his duties in April last month, so he is fairly new. Mr. Rikotso is a very seasoned banker, very experienced executive, and we really are hoping that he'll be able to take our strategy to the next level and really be able to consolidate much of the progress that we have already started to see. From an organizational perspective, we continue to really hold on to the very, very critical skill set that we have. That one of the Land Bank's key strengths is its agricultural expertise, and this is something that we really do focus on. We are currently also undergoing a strategic repositioning exercise to ensure that our structure is fit for purpose for the strategic direction that we're undertaking. Lastly, honourable members, I'd like to give an update in terms of the work that the board has been undertaking to ensure that we have accountability and we strengthen our consequence management within the bank. We have established a board level accountability and consequence management task team. And this task team was tasked with assessing the status quo of any investigations within the bank, gathering data and prioritizing matters for recommendation to the board and the National Treasury. Following that exercise, we identified a number of areas that we, as the board, would like to hone in on. And these are areas that give us some cause for concern. And we have thus asked the National Treasury to assist us in conducting a forensic audit of some loans that were granted, particularly through our intermediary partners over the last few years. Now, this is not in an exercise to simply point fingers, but it's important that we learn from the lesson. We learn from the past, and that where necessary, that we do hold people accountable, and that ultimately we have an entity that we can all be proud of, and an entity where there is proper accountability. Next slide, please. So these interventions, honourable members, are just the beginning in terms of the overall direction that the bank is taking. The first phase of our recovery was really focused on stabilizing the entity and ensuring that we have a solid base from which to build going forward. We have, over the last year, revised our strategy, really looking to align the Land Bank closer with its mandate and really closer to agricultural policy and where the country's priorities lie from a sector perspective. We have indicated quite clearly that the Land Bank is a specialist development finance institution. And in being so, we really look to balance our objectives of financial sustainability with developmental outcomes. And we really do this in order to meaningfully contribute to development and transformation in South Africa's agriculture. We have really defined our value proposition to the market, looking at where the critical areas are, where the critical market gaps are from a sector perspective. And what we have identified is that our role as the Land Bank is really to provide affordable finance, to also provide products that close the equity gap from a new entrant perspective. We are also looking to really be the key player in terms of providing and facilitating the provision of comprehensive pre-finance and post-finance support programs, because we have realized that there is quite a high number of entrepreneurial failure when it comes to new entrant farmers. We are also members as the Land Bank looking to strengthen our role in terms of bringing underutilized agricultural land back into production. And I know that this is an area that this committee has been discussing as well. From an outcome perspective, it is quite important that when we say that we are a DFI, that we're quite clear about what we want to achieve with the capital that we do ultimately deploy. And that is really inclusion, firstly. We want to meaningfully contribute as the Land Bank to the country's GDP in a measurable way. We want to create jobs. We also know that we have a very important role to play in terms of food security. Lastly, we also know that we are as a sector facing quite a number of risks from an environmental perspective. So it is quite important that as we do the lending that we do, we keep environmental stewardship at the top of our minds. We've set a number of targets for ourselves over the medium and long term. And this is really centered on transforming the makeup of our loan book. As members may be aware, our loan book is currently predominantly comprised of large commercial farmers, and we really are looking to transform the makeup of our book through a number of interventions from a developmental perspective. We are looking to meaningfully bring new development farmers into the sector in a sustainable way, but we're also looking to measure the number of jobs that we create as well as the ESG impact that we achieve through the funds that we deploy. Next slide, please. So this slide really just gives members an idea of what products and how we are looking at the various segments of the market when it comes to the size of farmers. We are looking to play across the spectrum when it comes to farmers in the sector, ranging from the large corporate farmers to the large scale farmers and ultimately small and medium scale farmers. And these are all products that are supported by our new bank assurance model, which really involves the integration of our insurance offering. So, regardless of, even though we are focusing to a much greater extent on the development segment of our book, we continue to service farmers across the spectrum as well. Next slide, please, Sydney. Now, when it comes to the partnership with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, this is a partnership that is incredibly important to the Land Bank. The Department of Agriculture is ultimately the policy department that we engage with as an entity. And over the years, we really have looked to strengthen our collaboration with the department and to align ourselves to the critical priorities that have been set by the policy department. And these really involve areas such as changing the patterns of land ownership, promoting sustainable agrarian reform, and also really strengthening and getting insights from the department on how we can better provide financial services that are more inclusive and allow for the achievement of broader priorities. And ultimately, what we have said as we are repositioning ourselves as an entity is that as a state-owned company that is responsible for funding in the agricultural sector, the Land Bank is a critical instrument for the achievement of national agricultural priority goals. And in our new lending programs, as you'll hear later in the presentation, we've really sought to align with the objectives of the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan. Lastly, honorable members, as we do this work, we are taking a slightly different approach in terms of how it is that we work with farmers, particularly new entrant farmers, from a value chain perspective, where we are really looking to support farmers, not just in terms of providing them with capital or financing, but really integrating these farmers into the value chain and assisting them to really have sustainable enterprises over the long term. So this role as integrator, from, in the value chain, as an orchestrator of pre and post financial support, and as a consolidator of all these various moving parts that farmers have to contend with, is something that we are taking quite seriously and have started to bake in to our new lending programs, as you'll hear later in the presentation. So that, honorable members, is really in a nutshell the just a few details around where we are and where we are going. We will now get into details of the specific funds, and I'm going to ask Sydney Soundy to assist us with this portion of the presentation, and Themba Rikotso, the CEO, will come in to discuss the blended finance program and conclude our presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair of Committee. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you, Sydney.
All right, I'll proceed. So as the Chair of the Board indicated, there were specific funds that we were asked to report on. Some of these funds, we are merely administrators of the funds, and in others, we also participate in providing loan financing as part of the fund. So I'll start with the Agri-BEE fund. This fund, members, was established a while back in 2006. It went through ups and downs, and some of you may know that at some point in the years of 2007, 2008, there were fraudulent activities around this fund, which led to prosecutions, which recently were reported in the media, and all of us would know about them. So it had various interruptions, this particular fund. The new MOA that was signed with the department, in other words, between Land Bank and the department to administer this fund, expired in 2022, or rather it was entered into in 2022 and will expire in 2024. Before this particular MOA, the Land Bank did not do any due diligence on applications that were provided by the department, which the department essentially looked at and assessed, as well as provided approvals thereto. You will see the objectives of this fund. I need not repeat those here. This slide, in order for me not to go through each and every bullet point, is basically to give an indication of the roles of the two parties that are managing this fund, being the department as well as Land Bank. You would know, if not, perhaps it's important to know that most of the origination of applications are handled at the provincial level. They are assessed there to see if these meet the criteria of the fund, and as such, provincial departments are a critical player in the value chain to identify potential beneficiaries for this particular fund. So essentially, as I was indicating, the department does the decision in terms of the approval of applications that come through this fund. The role of the bank is to administrate and manage the fund. And with the last MOA, the current one that is expiring in 2024, a further role was included for the Land Bank to undertake due diligence on applications. So essentially assisting to establish the viability of approving of these particular grants that the department needs to approve. And the departments essentially work with that report and make the decisions to approve. Once they've approved, the bank then manages the transaction in terms of disbursement of funds to the applicant. These are the criteria. I'm not going to read through them. You have them in your presentation. So if there are questions later around the criteria, we can handle those questions. In terms of how the fund has performed, the fund currently has a balance of 364 million. 68.7 million was disbursed since its inception. I did indicate when I started with the presentation on this particular fund that it has had ups and downs. So those disruptions have significantly impacted the extent to which disbursements have been made. But you can see that from the period April 2022 to date, in terms of the extent to which the activity has improved, disbursements were at 30.1 million. On the bottom there, it's an indication of the last 3 years and how those disbursements look like. So since its inception, in terms of that 68.7 million that has been disbursed, it has been disbursed to 13 applicants, creating job opportunities of 215. So that's as far as the Agri-BE fund is concerned. The other fund that we were asked to report on is that of Mafisa. And so with Mafisa, this fund was established by the department in 2004. And it was essentially to fill the gap that was left by the agriculture credit boards. It was to facilitate the provision of micro and retail agri-financial services. Essentially, its focus was on applicants who cannot offer traditional forms of collateral. And so it was dealing with that particular challenge that of applicants not having sufficient assets to back up the investments in their businesses. There was also an introduction later of intermediaries that would be used to on lend to end beneficiaries. This agreement, members, expired in 2013 and was not renewed and has not been renewed since then. However, the department is reviewing it. So there's currently a review to identify the gaps and to see how this should be taken forward. So that's why when you see the numbers in terms of progress, please just take note that this has actually been dormant since December of 2013. So again, in terms of how this fund worked, the department is the one that assessed applications and provided written instructions to the bank to disburse on those funds. So there was no loan component from the bank. The bank was solely looking at administrating and managing the fund on behalf of the department and to make those disbursements as instructed by the department. So in terms of qualifying criteria, again, instead of going through each and every element of the criteria, there was intermediaries that were introduced as indicated earlier, and specific criteria, particularly to assess the extent to which the intermediary has the capability and capacity to on lend, was done on the intermediary. And then indeed, in terms of who qualifies from an applicant, the list of those qualifications are there for members to see. Progress update, the balance currently in that account that is currently held by the bank is 16 million. If you take into account since the establishment of this fund over that period to 2013, 1.3 billion was disbursed. In November 2013, when this came to a halt, the bank returned whatever amounts were left in the fund to the fiscus. So in terms of its impact, from the 1.3 billion of disbursements that were made to beneficiaries or applicants, 25,700, contributing 68,000 job opportunities. The next fund, members, that we were asked to also provide an update on is a COVID relief fund. This fund was established for the Land Bank to assist its own clients. So this was contained to Land Bank and its own clients. An amount of 100 million was set aside for this August 2020, for the bank to essentially utilize this to help those COVID-19 impacted clients. I think the lessons we've learned here is that the criteria were very stringent and in fact also contained to a few commodities. And so to that extent, the bank found difficulty in approving transactions related to the nature of the criteria that were set. And so that's why you see that the amount of disbursements were very minimal, with the effect that 92.7 million has not yet been utilized. We are in the process, together with the department, to review the criteria. The essence of it being that we still have clients in the bank who have been impacted at that time by COVID and have not fully recovered from that process. And so an identification of those clients has been made, and the discussions with the department are ongoing to see if the remaining amount can be utilized to assist those clients out of their distress. So I did indicate in terms of the stringentness of the criteria, and these are mentioned here in the slide. And as such, as I indicated, we are in the process to revise the criteria with the department. And
please conclude. Please conclude.
Yes. So Chair, that's the progress update in terms of COVID Relief Fund. You will see the amounts that have been disbursed as we indicated. Next will be the Chief Executive Officer to provide an update on the blended finance scheme. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sydney. Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning to honorable members. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible. Can you do that presentation CFO within 5 minutes? Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll try and run through the presentation, and I'm mindful of the time that you have indicated. I'm not going to spend too much time on the purpose of the blended finance, but the blended finance, as it was introduced, the main purpose really was to support the sustainable development of commercial black producers and really help them so that they can help address some of the concerns we have on food security and wealth creation. And specifically, it was to enhance the production and agro-processing of agricultural products. If you look at the criteria, which is this slide here, the criteria, as communicated, we hope that many of the honorable members will be quite familiar with it, really targeted at South Africans with a valid identity, Black-owned and managed. That's very important, focusing on managed. Enterprises with 10% farm worker profit sharing were also in the scope, and the specific focus on youth, women, people with disability, as well as the military veterans. On the age side, applicants over 60 also will be considered. Of course, there was a little bit of a criteria that they need to demonstrate there will be a successor. Long list of exclusions as well, which I'm not going to go through in detail. If you look at the qualifying criteria, there were minimum points expected to be scored so that an applicant will actually qualify. These points were earned on different scorecard categories on ownership and transformation, their own contribution that they will bring as part of the applications, the ability of the project to create employment, the contribution into food security, the sustainable development, and how they will actually use that to do some localization where they will be operating. As far as the commodities that will be in scope, quite a broad category. It looked at meat overall, poultry and red meat. It looked also at piggery, grains across different categories of grains and oilseeds are included, sugarcane, cotton, dairy, vegetables. So very, very inclusive and quite a broad range of commodities. If you look at the structure of the fund itself and the pipeline, so firstly, important to indicate that as far as we are concerned, especially with the new revised blended finance as it was launched in 2022 October, the pipeline is being built. I must say, honorable members, that the pipeline is actually getting much, much better compared to what it used to be. If you look at the structure of the funds as it is now, we're looking at a total of 1.4 billion. Of course, we have shared the details here, honorable members. Key to notice here is that this 1.4 billion is made up of about 700 million of a loan portion and about 750 million of a grant portion. And these honorable members will allow us to reach quite a wide variety of farmers. If we are to look at the updates, honorable members, we have had approvals to the total of 255 million. Again, I mentioned that we're running with the revised blended finance scheme that we only launched in greater details from October. And this 255 was made up of 121, which is loans, and about 133 of grants. As far as the disbursements to date, about 7 million of it has been disbursed. I must say, honorable members, that if we're to look at this progress from now going forward to the next couple of months, I'm confident to tell you that this will shift quite strongly. If we're to look at this from the provincial perspective, Northern Cape actually has been the most successful province compared to others. There's quite a lot of lessons that us as an institutions are learning from Northern Cape. They've accounted for about 98 million out of the 255. They are followed strongly by Western Cape and Mpumalanga, and of course the other provinces are lagging quite behind. If you are to look at it from the numbers perspective, Northern Cape also is leading. If you apply a lens of the commodity and the producer category, very clear that table grapes represent the bulk of what has been approved so far, followed very strongly by sugarcane category, livestock, cattle in particular, and the macadamia, pecan nuts, and avocados also accounting very, very strongly. The number of farmers, of course, on the previous category, I'm sure honorable members, you have read a lot of this. If we're to look also at the effectiveness of the blended finance scheme so far, we have had about 30 number of applications that have been approved. If you are to look at the permanent jobs that have been created so far, honorable members, we have had about 104 jobs that are permanent, and about almost 500 seasonal jobs have been created. If you are to look at historically disadvantaged female beneficiaries, about 31 of them has been female, youth about 25, and male at 37. This again, honorable members, as indicated, will change quite significantly as we go forward. As far as the update on the fund itself is concerned, the balance on the fund as at 31 March 2023 was about 1.1 billion. Disbursements at the same period, about $500 million. And year to date, which is just focusing on 2022 and April and 31 March 2023, it's 3 million. Important to mention that at this period, the fund also was put on hold, going under a review in order for it to be relaunched again in October 2022. So this, honorable members, is the update that I wanted to provide as far as blended finance is concerned. Some of the critical updates, if we just go back on the previous slide, I want to touch on a few critical points. You will remember, honorable members, that as Land Bank, we play two roles. One is the role of a fund administrator. The progress report on that is that everything as far as the fund administration element progressing very, very well. Of course, it's at early stages, lots of lessons to learn, but it's. I'm happy to report that we are happy with the role that we are playing as an administrator. As an implementer, honorable members, you have seen the report on the progress so far. There's quite a lot of improvement that we are implementing. And as indicated, if we're to look at the report again a couple of months from now, you will see a massive shift in that a lot of lessons we have learned, we are applying them on how we can improve the effectiveness, one on the origination, but also to have the right sort of development impact. If you may proceed to the next slide. The last one I want to touch on, honorable members, is the Agro Energy Fund that has been announced by the Minister of Darat earlier this week. It has been announced, honorable members, we are busy with our discussion with the department to try and iron out the modalities as far as this fund is concerned. As you are aware, honorable members, the purpose of this is to really help the farmers who are experiencing the energy challenges at the back of the current energy cuts. And this fund, honorable members, will help them to really have some solutions on what we call the intensive agricultural activities on their businesses. And this will include the irrigation aspect, the intensive agricultural production side, and the cold chain related activities. We are having a meeting early next week where a lot of the details, together with the DG and some other critical members in the Department of Agri, will help us to iron out the next details as far as this fund is concerned. So that is all I wanted to provide, honorable members. I will hand over to the chairperson to make the last remarks and actually hand over to the committee. Chairperson of the Board of Land Bank.
Thank you very much, CEO, and thank you, Honourable Chair. Our apologies for the lengthy presentation. There are quite a number of funds that we had to provide feedback on, but that concludes our presentation, Chairperson.
Thank you, honorable members. That's the presentation from the Land Bank chairperson, as well as the CEO and CFO. I will now invite honorable members for questions of clarity or comments on the presentation. Honorable Klape.
Thank you, Chairperson. And my apologies once more. Like I indicated, I will be traveling. Chair, let me welcome the presentation by the Land Bank. And I think, Chair, mine will be comments in the most. Chair?
Yes, we can hear you. You are audible. Proceed.
Am I still audible with you?
Yes, you are audible. You may proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, I think as the portfolio committee, we would have to go back with the department out of the presentations that we have today. And thanks for the Land Bank to come and clarify some of the issues. For an example, Chair, my take is that all the programs that we're talking here about, for me, they are in a way excluding the people that they should be benefiting, your small scale farmers, your emerging farmers. The criteria that is being used is stringent, as the presenters are saying. And this is also evident in a way that all of these programs, they get to be put on hold to revise them and be relaunched. And my question here is that as and when that happens, where is the department? Does the bank call the department and say, we are not winning on this one, let's put it on hold and relaunch? Blood and Finance is on hold as we speak, according to them. They are going to revise it and relaunch. Whilst we know, we're sitting here and thinking, we know what it stands for. I want to hear also, Chair, what is the threshold on the Agri-BE fund? Because Mafisa, it is indicated there, it's about 2 million. But on the Agri-BE fund, how far do they fund the threshold? Chair, on the BEE Agri Fund and the COVID relief, I didn't see the categories of those funded by provinces. And that is very key for us, Chair, to understand the uniformity or how spread it is. Only with the blended finance, I saw provinces. And it is also, it will be interesting for us as the committee to know the kind of people that get funded. Do you have black farmers around us? Or is just those that are white commercial farmers? Because if we have to talk transformation, Chair, that should also be taken on into consideration. We will be watching, Chair, the Agro Energy Fund, like it's indicating also, is for intensive agricultural production. And who are these big commercial farmers at the exclusions of our blacks? We go around and say to our black farmers, you have COVID relief, you have all this. And now it's sitting there, it's not being used because of stringent criteria. That's why I'm saying, Chair, let's go back, find time and sit with the department or based on this presentation and see how does your emerging and small scale farmers benefit out of this. We cannot make hype out of everything whilst people are excluded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Klape. The Honorable Ntate Masipa.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll have to be quick because I'm getting to load shedding. First, Chair, let me really thank the presenters, the Chairperson, the CEO, and Mr. Soundy from the Land Bank. Just Chair, from your for your own knowledge, is that I come from the Land Bank. And I kind of know how Land Bank really operated then. What is very interesting for me is the Chair seems to be really on top of the game. And I must just say, thank you, Chair, for your real demonstration of the importance of this institution. But Chair, what is very important for me really is the capacity of the bank, because the Chair indicated to us that obviously the bank is to provide affordable finance and support the pre-finance and the post-finance support. My question really is the capacity of the bank in terms of fulfilling these promises. Because really structurally, if we look at the Land Bank right now, in terms of the ability to fulfill the affordable finance and looking at obviously the environment that we are trading in at the moment, the affordable finance is impossible unless the partners like the government and other institutions that are willing to provide the grant funding are coming to partner with a bank. And the chair indicated that they sitting with about 300 staff members. The pre-finance and the post-finance, which I believe that with this amount of staff member, maybe if she can really assist us with a breakdown of the amount of the frontline staff that will really be able to carry out this pre and the post finance support that is needed. And I think this question ties up to what Honorable Klape said, to say how many of this support have been given to emerging farmers or to the smallholder farmers who are obviously in need of support. And again, I'm also on the same subject of the capacity of the bank in terms of doing all this, you know, with regards to the underutilized land. This was raised by the minister that NEMAC did a study and indicated that if we convert, we work the 10% of the land that is underutilized, we should be able to bring revenue of about 59 billion. So the question for me is that in terms of the bank or the board or the institution itself, how is the chair seeing the land bank applying itself within the constraints that the institution is really facing at the moment and within the constraint that the country is facing at the moment? I would love to do a follow-up question once this question has been really answered. The other issue, Chair, that I have got, this really go to the department and to Land Bank itself. I don't know if it was the Chair or Sydney. I think there was an indication that there is an MOU or a memorandum of understanding for the for Agri-BEE that is between 2022 and 2024. Now, if you look at the MOU that is only of 2 years, and your funding structure at Land Bank, you know, extend to up to 25, even 30 years. Now, to have an MOU or MOA of 2 years, you know, I mean, the first year you're probably just putting applications together, paying out in your second year, and you only start probably seeing crops or whatever, you know, come into production in your 5th or 6th year in some of these table grapes that they've just mentioned. So I just want to get an understanding, how did the department and the Land Bank agree on an MOU that is just only 2 years for agricultural sector, that we know that, you know, is not really a short-term, there's obviously production funding that you do, which is a 1-year funding, but primarily the Agri-BEE is really on a long-term basis rather than short-term basis. I just want to understand. I know that the Land Bank is an administrator, but if the government, I mean, if the government and the Treasury can just explain to us as to how did they arrive at this arrangements that they have got with the bank. Chair, the second one is, I mean, the other point is around Mafisa. It is my understanding that it has been dormant since 2013. Really, the question is the amount that has been returned to the Land Bank. I can't remember the exact amount. I think it's 16.5 million. Oh, no, sorry. The 136 million that has been returned to Treasury. Treasury is here as well, and I must say that it is important that they assist us here. Is this money going to be made available to the Land Bank to be able to use this Land Bank to really support our smallholder farmers and those that are really in need in that particular category? And again, obviously addressing the issue of Metlape to say that, you know, we need to understand how the support is for this emerging farmers. Chair, there was arrangements that were made between HOTFIN and the Land Bank, and this was not part of the presentation, but Chair, this is from the Jobs Fund that the Land Bank had arrangements with HOTFIN to blend those kind of finance. I just want to understand if those arrangements still exist or they don't exist anymore. Chair, I think that's from my side for now, but I will definitely want to get a chance to do a follow-up around the questions of capacity issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Masipa. Honorable Kaba. Honorable Kaba.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me join my colleagues in welcoming the presentation by the Land Bank. And also appreciate the fact that they have reduced liabilities, and also try to appreciate the fact that the institution of the clean audit. I have two questions, Chair. They are linked, mainly on the exclusions. Besides the three categories that I have mentioned in the exclusions, what would be other things or issues that would make the applicant to fail the application, besides these exclusions that are stipulated there? And secondly, Chair, with the understanding of the criteria, and that there's a process of reviewing the criteria in the interest of the suffering. In the estimation of the Land Bank, what would be the time frame or estimated time that this would be resolved? Because to me, it seems urgent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaba. The Honorable Ntate Matiase.
Well, thank you so much, Talibunga, Chairperson, for the opportunity, and greetings to the representative of the Land Bank. May I also join my colleagues in welcoming the presentation. Look, Honorable Chair, the development finance institutions such as the Land Bank and the IDC plays an important role in the advancement of our democratic dispensation. And their contribution must not just be measured by what appears to be meaningless statistical numbers presented in graphs and in the manner in which they have been presented. But they've got to have direct impact on the lives of ordinary people. What they refer to as the historically disadvantaged persons. And this must be through observable, sustainable improvement in the quality of life, in the standard of living, and in the forms of incomes that they accrue from the interventions provided or initiated by these DFIs, through the funding, through the projects that they undertake, through the types and the quality of facilities that they provide, and infrastructure base. I don't have a sense, Honorable Chair, that this is what the Land Bank is contributing. We'll reflect on the IDC later after they have made their presentation. I'm saying this, Honorable Chair, because when you look at the slide by the Land Bank on the current state of the bank, it says that the bank remains solvent as total assets are higher than the total liabilities, which is a good point. But then look at what is the profit of the bank. And I would want to think that this is what is in their books. They say they've got a profit of 703 million. Shouldn't that be 703 billion? What kind of a bank is this that can boost about 703 million in its books? What can be done with 703 million rand? Is it a joke? Perhaps they must open their books before the portfolio committee so that we can look into what is really into the books. Otherwise, this is a joke. And they're also not telling us what are their alternative revenue generation sources, other than the annual allocations that they got from the department and the National Treasury. We'll have to force the bank to open its books so that we can see what is contained in there. Honorable Chair, I hear that there are different funding models and vehicles by the bank to fulfill their constitutional mandate imposed on them by the Constitution as well as government. But one has got no sense as to how their funding model is made accessible for the historically disadvantaged persons. They've got to tell us and demonstrate how the funding facilities are benefiting the historically disadvantaged individuals. I can tell you now, Honorable Chair, that in their presentation, they are not telling us, Honorable Chair, for your indulgence, through these funding vehicles, over and above the geographic geographic demographics, Free State, Northern Cape, Northwest, Eastern Cape is lagging behind, and so forth and so on. They are not telling us how their funding trickles down massively to historically disadvantaged individuals in terms of race, in terms of gender, as well as in terms of age. We want to see that. I'm saying this against the dominant role played by South African Poultry Association, which is predominantly white, which takes the lion's share of what comes from the land bank. And we can mention all different commodity sectors, which, because of the history of this country, are predominantly white-owned, white-controlled, white-managed, and the bulk of the funding from the land bank goes to those white-owned commodity sectors at the expense of our people. The poultry sector, Honorable Chair, through its sector master plan, is set to achieve or establish about 50 contract growers by the end of 2023. We need to know whether they have achieved that target of 50 contract growers. They may say they have not achieved that because we're halfway towards the end of the year. We need also to know who these peoples are. Who are they? Women? Are they Black? Are they people with disabilities? Are they young people? We need to get the statistics about all of that. I'm not impressed, as I conclude, Honorable Chair, I'm not impressed about this kind of presentation. It's taking us for a ride. Doesn't really reveal much about what our people are benefiting out of the funding models and facilities of the land bank. And for that, I will ask that a follow-up presentation need to be made, need to be arranged with the bank, and they must reveal, as I propose, and disclose what is in their books. I will perhaps come later with follow-up questions, Honorable Chair.
achtbare project.
Voorzitter, hi Chairperson. I came in late out of a very cold Cape Town. It feels like I'm back in the Free State. No, Chairperson, I joined the meeting late as I was in another meeting. So I think my colleagues have completely covered my questions. I will not ask anything today. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Chwete.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to everybody in the meeting. Chair, let me appreciate the report, the presentation by Eland Bank as one of the entities that we've been longing to get clarities and information about what is their mandate and how do they work. Firstly, Chair, on the issue of Agri-BE Fund, I think, Chair, the questions that I have, I will direct them to the department. I want to indicate to this meeting that I very much appreciate the clarity from the Land Bank of their role in terms of administering the processing of the funds and what is the role of the department when it comes to this. They were very clear. We will follow up on the challenges of fraudulent activities. Yes, they mentioned the year 2007 and 2008. There are also certain issues that were raised, especially on the media, about certain misconduct on under this Agri-BE Fund. Let me go straight, Chair, to Mafisa. The MOA expired in 2013 in Mafisa, and there was a balance of 136 million that Eland Bank shared with us. That 136 million was returned to National Treasury. I want to understand, and I need a clarity. In the presentation in 2014, there was an amount of 35 million that has been approved to EVA. Now I would like to understand, Chair, this 35.9 million that has been approved in 2013, a year after, in 2014, a year after the MOA expired. How is this possible? How is it done? How do you approve a funding that is beyond your MOA agreement? How is it? Can I get a clarity on that one? On the issue of blended finance, Chair, as much as it's support for commercialization of Black farmers, I would like to agree with Honorable Matias. This issue of these programs that are given to Land Bank, their main aim is to focus on previous disadvantaged people, farmers and stuff. But now, I don't get a gist, Uguti, where are these people? What happened to this? Who has been funded? For instance, in the presentation, they on one of the graphs, there was an indication that the Northern Cape is the highest that is benefiting with about 98 million, or if not 95 million, and followed by the Western Cape, and followed. But we know the demographics of those provinces. There is 0 in the Eastern Cape. There is 1%, if not 3%, in KZN. Can we get, Chair, a detail of these funds? Out of that 95%, black owned, that 95 million or 98 million, who are these people? So that we can go and do oversight and get a real gist to go to this. These are the black owned farmers, commercial farmers.
Yeah.
Lastly, Chair, there is 255 million approved as at 31st March 2023. That's what the presenter was saying under the blended finance. And the criteria used is youth, women, people with disability, and military vets. My question there, Chair, is there's an indication that the youth benefited 25% of that 255 million. That is almost run about 65 million that the youth benefited there. Where are these farmers? Can they share to us how many farms or entity or business commercial under this blended finance program? Where are they? How much was distributed to each farmer? Can we get those details just on one? The youth benefited. I won't say women and how many, just the youth. I just want out of this 255 million as of March this year. Lastly, Chair, my very last question, Chair, is the issue that under blended finance, Land Bank has been non-operational for about 18 months. What was the alternative? Was there an alternative funding in regards to this blended finance? What was happening there? On the issue of agro energy fund, Chair, I will announced by the minister. Of course, there are still talks, but we will keep on. We appreciate this initiative a lot. We will keep on monitoring it and overseeing what is happening, Chair. That's all for me now. For now, Chair, I am very much clarified. The other issues, I will take it with the department because for a very long time we've been getting a dilly-dally. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ndate Muntwedi.
Honorable Chairperson Ndate Mandela, a very good morning to all members of Parliament. Chair, just a quick one. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes, you are audible. You may proceed.
Yes, Chair. Just a quick one, Chair. I have noticed the department has a tendency of dumping money to third parties for them to implement key departmental programs, and such third parties end up failing to implement such very important programs of the department. We know, Chair, that the department before implemented the former recapitalization program, now called Land and Development Support, by dumping money to community organizations that really failed to implement programs, key programs of the department, Chair. And it is an open secret, and Ndate Mandela and the committee, that Land Bank has dismally failed to implement on these development-orientated programs. There were the Job Fund, the Wine Fund, Agri-BEE Fund, Mafisa Fund, blended funds, and many more. And the question to the department is that why are they still transferring a lot of money? Like they transferred about 100 million of COVID-19 funds to Land Bank, with thousands and thousands of farmers still struggling at this point in time. Now, I want to know, what is the practical plan in place to remedy this situation? Because commercial banks are still ignoring destitute black farmers, Chair. And why does the department continue to still fail itself with the Land Bank? Now, Chair, when the CEO of Land Bank was presenting, she mentioned that they failed to retain critical employees. And I agree with that statement. And amongst the many employees that Land Bank failed to retain, I want to speak of one guy who I met during most of the farmers meeting, where we normally go to a farmers meeting, where he acted on the bank for a good 3 years, And the bank lost him, Mr. Lwandiso Makapula, one of the very skilled and capable bankers, Chair. They've lost him. I don't know. Maybe one must just ask the bank to say, what are the plans in place to retain or even bring back capable and skilled employees to the bank? By law, the bank really they know more about developmental finance. Now, Chair, I also want to find out from the bank, how many positions remain vacant and funded by your institution like that in the Northwest? I know that the branch manager for the Northwest is on an acting basis, Chair. And also to say that the Vryburg branch of the Land Bank used to have 6 bankers, and now it's 2 bankers. That gets overwhelmed by the work, and the bank taking times to actually even approving transactions, Chair. Now, I want to check also with the department to say, well, I've noted in the presentation, Chair, that the Northern Cape is said to be one of the most successful. Well, I think it's true, but one must give credit where it's due to the bankers, the white bankers there, Carol Berger and Lambert Nell. I think they're doing a sterling work, Chair. They are committed to making sure that Black farmers are implemented and participate through these programs, unlike other bankers that are actually not assisting the bank. I want to know from the Land Bank, how is this black and white bankers ratio? How is the black and white bankers ratio in the bank? And how is it affecting approval of applications as some bankers, including some of these sellers, are having attitude towards the department because this program of the blended finance failed before, and some are not actually happy that a department has taken a posture to say this blended finance must actually support Black farmers. Now, another question, Chair, is that what are the norms on affordability that are used by the bank on Black farmers? And also to check, Chair, to say, where does Land Bank get the data relating to performance of commodities? As at least according to me, I think that the bank, they are using old departmental data, and which results in farmers' application failing. And is it possible for Land Bank to adopt departmental data relating to performance of commodities? Because you find at some point the department saying this particular farm can produce 10 tons, maybe on a certain commodity, but Land Bank comes there and say, no, instead of 10 tons, it can produce 4 tons. We should automatically affect the viability of such an applications. Now, Chair, when the minister launched the program, she spoke of removing red tapes. And I still get worried because some of those red tapes that are not yet removed remains when you look at the applications of Land Bank, they've got about 7 forms that must be filled, which still reviews the red tapes. Are they willing to review these applications together with what should be attached with the applications? And also, Chair, why is the Land Bank not funding farm improvements on communal land and state-owned land without collateral? Because they said they want to remove red tapes, but the red tapes such as collateral are still there, Chair. And then I just want to run quickly through these questions to say, most of the approved farms would be purchase of livestock only without acquisition, because most farms where farmers are applying for acquisition, they are said that due to carrying capacity, such applications are being rejected. Now, this, Chair, it goes back to the data that I spoke before to say, when you look at Land Bank, how do they determine the livestock value? They get to determine the livestock value of a developmental farmer at around 3,000 against the same cow, the same breed of a commercial farmer at about 15,000. And this really affects affordability whilst applications are being rejected. Is the Land Bank willing to review how they deal with the livestock values of farmers, not treat farmers who are in rural communal land the same as farmers that are, they must treat them the same as farmers that find themselves in commercial land. Now, Chair, last 2 things is, why is the Land Bank not funding farms under claims? As we have farms that are still under land claims, and those farms, they continue to lose value. And it will take a lot of time for those farms to get back into production. Why is Land Bank not considering such farms when they are actually approved? The last thing on my side, Chair, is that how is Land Bank planning on expanding their footprint by linking their offices with local municipal offices, even departmental offices? as they are currently very far from farmers and farmers are struggling to actually reach land bank. Those are my few questions, Chair. Thanks very much, Tate Mandela. Ke lebogetse tšhono. Where I am, the network is very poor, very poor. Mara ke lebogetse tšhono mpileng yone mo dula stile. Ke a leboga.
Thank you, Honorable Tate Montedi. Honorable members, any other honorable member who may wish to pose a question, I've not recognized. Well, it seems you have all been covered. Maybe I can also add in 2 questions on my side regarding blended finance. Honorable members, I just want to ascertain how does the Land Bank ensure that applicants generally have profit sharing for farm workers, and that is something that is just not on paper alone. How can we be certain that this happens? As the committee, honorable members, we've seen many cases where farm workers' names have been used to benefit from government programs without their knowledge or benefits accruing to them. So if we can gain clarity on this from the Land Bank. Also, honorable members, as it has been mentioned by Honorable Kape and other members on the platform, our interest as the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development is not just about spending of funds, but we want evidence of transformation and support that has been provided to historically disadvantaged farmers, in particular, through those funds. In this regard, we would like honorable members to have a detailed report as attested by Honorable Tshwete of the farmers or agribusinesses that have been reportedly supported through each funding instrument. The report should include provincial breakdown, race, gender, and farmer category and commodity in each case. We would request for these to be done no later than next week, Friday, being the 19th of May, submitted to the Secretariat of the Portfolio Committee. And all the questions that we have raised, we would want them also to be submitted in writing to the Portfolio Committee Secretariat by no later than close of business day next week, Friday. But let us hand back, honorable members, to the Land Bank, Chairperson, CEO, and CFO, and its officials to respond to the questions. You may proceed, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you to honorable members for their questions. I'll kick off with the responses and ask my colleagues to assist with many of them. But let me start off by indicating, Honorable Chair, we will certainly provide that written submission. We will also, honorable members, provide more detail regarding our strategy and our turnaround plan. Unfortunately, we are unable to detail the full extent of what we have planned and what we've put forward and what we've committed to in the short time frame available. But I think, Honorable Chair, from what I'm hearing this morning, there is certainly a need for the bank to take the committee through its thinking, to discuss our financial performance in detail with the committee, and we're happy to do that upon invitation. In speaking to the question raised by the Honorable Matiase, I understand that perhaps our profitability, Honorable Member, may not be what it was historically, but we must also remember the very, very difficult period that the Land Bank has come out of. Just barely 2 years ago, this entity was in a severely loss-making position. And through intensive cost containment exercises, through prudent spending, through our collections, our cash generating activities, we are now in a position where we are no longer in the red. And this is something that we as the bank look to improve upon, but it certainly is quite a change from where we were historically. In terms of the blended finance program, honorable members, let me clarify that this program is not on hold. We are currently executing on this program, and as the CEO has indicated, we're progressing quite well in terms of this program. We have, of course, just in line with what we've been talking about in this presentation, looked at what lessons are to be learned from the previous programs where Land Bank had not delivered as expected. So one of the things that we have done is that we have amended our credit policies extensively to ensure that we are able to offer credit in a manner that is inclusive and doesn't contain criteria that will exclude those who need it most. We have reopened many of the provincial offices that had previously been closed, really expanding our footprint. We have embarked on an extensive recruitment exercise to ensure that we have sufficient capacity. We have started to train not just our bankers, who are mainly experienced in the field of commercial banking, but really to equip our bankers with an understanding of what we want to achieve from a developmental perspective. So we as an entity have really looked at ourselves and looked at where we went wrong and really sought to strengthen those areas that were quite weak in the bank. To the point raised by the Honorable Masipa around capacity, and this of course also mirrors the comments made by Honorable Mundwedi around the capacity and vacancies within the bank. As members will appreciate, when an entity goes through as difficult a period as what we experienced in 2020, where the future of the bank is uncertain, employees get nervous. We lost a lot of employees during that period. The uncertainty was certainly quite negative for retention of our critical skills. But since stabilizing the entity, we have embarked on a number of retention initiatives. We have started to see our HR positions stabilize. And as I indicated, we've embarked on a recruitment exercise to fill these. What we have decided is that we are not going to reinvent the wheel in terms of the support structures that are available in the sector. So Honorable Masipa, when it comes to areas such as pre and post finance support, we are very aware that there are farmer associations, there are commodity associations that are quite skilled in providing programs to farmers at the ground level. So we are partnering with these entities, with these associations. So our model involves quite a lot of partnerships, and we are not intending to reinvent the wheel. We're working very closely with these associations and with the Department of Agriculture as well. I'm going to ask the CEO to speak further and respond further to the questions around capacity. CEO, if you can also address the question raised by Honorable Matiase around the impact and how it is that we demonstrate impact of the work that we do. If you could also touch on Honorable Matias's question around alternative revenue as well as the funding model. If you can also touch on the question raised by Honorable Mundwedi around the demographics of the employees that we have and how this relates to the farmers that we support. Sydney, I request that you come in on the questions raised by Honorable Klape around the criteria for our lending programs, the threshold on the Agri-BEE fund, as well as the questions around COVID relief fund and the breakdown per province, as well as come in on questions raised by Honorable Masipa on the Hortfin and Land Bank's Jobs Fund. And if you could also touch on the breakdowns that a number of members have requested, that members want to see more granular detail around who it is that we're supporting and how do we measure this impact. CEO?
Thank you, Chairperson of the Land Bank Board. Chairperson of the committee, thank you so much for this opportunity. Let me start by saying this is my second month at Land Bank, and I think a lot of the challenges that have been indicated here I take full accountability and responsibility for them. However, the important point to mention here is that these are challenges that a lot of them, as the chairperson of the board of Land Bank indicated, they came up soon after the Land Bank went into default. If you look at the capacity challenges that we face, it is known that whenever an institution goes into default and starts to experience the challenges that it faces, where its existence is in question, a lot of staff members will start to actually feel very insecure. The good staff will leave first. However, what we're doing now is that the issue of capacitating the institution has become my primary focus. We have started already to identify exactly what it is that we need to do to ensure that we have capacity to execute, capacity to learn from some of the good work that we have seen from the Northern Cape and the Western Cape, and capacity to start implementing blended finance and many other programs in a very quick and effective manner. So we have already started to identify exactly the model, capacitating model we need to put in place, both to help us with origination. We have also identified what we need to do quickly to capacitate ourselves. Of course, one of the reasons why some staff were leaving us is because there were a lot of uncertainties around the focus, a lot of questions around whether or not the Land Bank will actually close. We are answering all of those questions. We're providing clarity to all of them, and we are ensuring that staff understand exactly what is the revised forecast, what exactly are we doing to ensure that we get out of this default situation. So capacity is primary. I believe that, hence I said earlier, if you are to look at our progress in the next couple of months, you will see a major shift on the number of applications we are able to close and start to disburse. You will start to see a huge shift as far as the development impact that we want to bring in, and also a lot of the challenges that are coming from a provincial level. There's been quite a lot of questions regarding the capacity at provincial branches. You will start to see a shift there because we're addressing the issue of capacity right from the bottom, the branches, the provinces, and also making sure that the strategic programs like blended finance and many others are addressed. So, and we will share the specifics as we respond, chairperson of the committee, in writing as we indicated. But this is a priority to me. Quite a number of days in a week, we have sessions where we are talking about what we're doing. In fact, today, straight after this, we're even having an HR workshop to try and address some of the challenges that were there from a culture point of view, which we are addressing. As far as the impact, which is the next question, honorable members, you are right in saying that our impact shouldn't be measured only on the financial numbers, how well we are doing as an institutions, how many grants we are or loans we are disbursing, but it should be measured on the real impact that we are making, on the effectiveness of the development, the jobs that we are creating, the wealth we are creating on these farmers, but more importantly, how well we are doing in helping these farmers to become commercial farmers. It is for that reason, honorable members, that if you look at our model, which we would like to come back a few months from now, chairperson, to address many of the questions asked, but also to start giving you clarity on what exactly is changing with these institutions. You will see that the biggest change that we are coming up with, chairperson, is to help these farmers to become very strong commercial farmers. The reality is the following. The life of a Black farmer is very, very hard in South Africa. A Black farmer on a standalone basis experiences huge amount of risks, huge amount of challenges with not only the financing, not only the challenges around the commodities and the risk associated to it, but massive challenges with the cost of inputs, massive challenges with, more importantly, access to market. The partnership model that we are coming with, Honorable Chair, is to make sure that we actually take an ecosystem approach, negotiate partnership and offtake agreements on behalf of those farmers, ensure that we address all the pain points and frictions on the whole ecosystem, and lead in orchestrating solutions. We're taking a full ecosystem and value chain approach to make sure that the development impact, it's not just financing, it's not just making sure we disburse the funds, but making sure that we take out the input costs or the cost-related challenges, take out the market access challenges, take out some of the costs related with many traders and aggregators in there. Honorable Chairperson of this committee would like to come back and expose to you what exactly is the change. We talk about big words, want to be integrator, want to be coordinator, want to be that orchestrator. We will want to come back and expose that exactly on what it means. What are these partnerships that we have signed already? How is it helping in creating solid, effective commercial farmers? Chairperson, if we are not able to create companies that will be sustainable, that will create jobs that will last forever, that will help communities and make sure that we create wealth with these farmers, I think we will have failed, Chairperson. On the alternative revenue streams, again, we'll want to come back and expose this, but part of looking at the ecosystem end to end and starting to basically become an integrator and orchestrator was to identify a lot of opportunities that are there for us to diversify our revenue streams, to make sure that we know that what we are doing with the farmers is linked with an offtake, and everything in between, we facilitate, identify revenue alternatives, but also we have other thoughts that we'll share with this honorable portfolio committee as far as that is concerned. But we are diversifying our revenue. We don't want to have only one revenue line that we are relying on. On the issue of funding model, this is a very, very big issue for us. We appeared on the select committee on finance, I think about 3 weeks ago. The issue of funding model was discussed. The reality at the moment is that the current funding model of Land Bank is not ideal for us to do an effective development mandate. We rely quite heavily on the debt and capital markets. We have a lot of restrictions. It is one of the reasons that we are in default today and we have the challenges. We are busy discussing with National Treasury on how we can actually revise that funding model. We are working together with NT on the business case that we'll present to them. We are having a strategy workshop with National Treasury. We say by end of this month. Amongst many things that we'll address is the ideal funding model of Land Bank, and more importantly, how it should be shifted to start focusing more on helping us to drive the development mandate. I think on demographics, Chairperson of the committee would like to come back to you in writing and give you the specifics around the actual impact that we have created. The honorable members have been very clear that when it comes to youth, they want to see names, the name of the entity that we have funded, exactly who is youth in there, and so on, honorable members. So we will come back and be very, very clear. But I think what I want to leave you with, honorable committee members, is that we have realized that the only way we can be effective in doing what we are supposed to do is to shift our focus, is to shift how we are doing things. And that is part of our strategy refresh that we'll share later. But also, we need to quickly get out of a default situation. We are currently operating under default that puts a lot of restrictions on us, and we are busy almost on a weekly basis having discussions with the current lenders and National Treasury to get out of that. And the sooner we get out of that, the more we can start doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is the effective development mandate. I will stop there, Chairperson of the Land Bank Board, and hand over to Sydney to address the next questions.
Thanks, CEO. Thanks, Chair of Committee. What I'll do is I'll address the items on the basis of questions related to a particular fund as directed by the Chair of the Board. So let me start off with the Agri BE questions. Honorable Masipa raised the issue of an 18 months MOA. That MOA was entered into because there was a revision in terms of 18 months, but it's important to point to the following. That when the grant, by the way, Agri-BE operates on a grant basis, and it does not require that there be a loan. So that grant is a once-off, and therefore the period of time that you enter into in terms of the MOA does not affect the longevity of the transaction that is being undertaken. How it would affect is where the grant is complementing an already existing facility with a bank that goes a long period. But as I say, the 18 months is not significant in this in this particular instance. Then there was the issue around thresholds, how the thresholds are pegged. It's a minimum of 1 million of grant and a maximum of 5 million of grant for any applicant. And those grants must be complemented by the applicant's own contribution of 10%, depending on the nature of the equity or shares that are being taken into a particular business for which this Agri-BE fund is forecast. There was also a question then on Mafisa relating to the dates. Yeah, the dates can be confusing, Chairperson. The reason for it is that what you see there is we've given the numbers per financial year. So where you see financial year 2014, what it means is that for the period between April of 2013 to March 2014, transactions that will be undertaken during that period are counted for that financial year. The fund was stopped in December 2013, meaning that there's a period between April and December 2013 when transactions would have been disbursed. And so that hopefully clarifies that aspect in terms of the timelines. Then there was also a question raised around land banks providing facilities to land under claims. So let me make this clear. From a land bank point of view, once we've received particular confirmations from the Provincial Land Claims Commission around the fact that a particular land is indeed under claim, but that the sought outcome of that claim is not restoration. Because if it is restoration, it can interrupt if we finance someone in that land. So if there's a restoration outcome required, we would not fund for that land because of that disruption that could happen. And as such, where there isn't, we are able to fund those facilities. However, the reason why it's indicated in the funds is because the requirement in terms of our principals, the department, is that our blended finance scheme at this time should not be financing land under claim. That aspect is currently under discussions with the department, and so hopefully some resolution could be found around that. Then in terms of generally around criteria, yes, the criteria that are specified are the ones that we focus on, and exclusions, as was indicated, are only the ones that we focus on. Where there may be matters of interpretation, and this aspect was also raised by Honorable Montwedi, is in terms of the assessment of the viability of the transaction. Because there we have to apply particular assessment tools as well as norms that needs to be taken into account in order to establish the extent to which we believe a transaction is going to be viable and sustainable, to avoid an instance where we get into financing that could have immediate distress and challenges. So that's where perhaps there could be issues around debates as to whether or not something is actually viable or not. And then in terms of HOTFIN, the issue of HOTFIN, yes, HOTFIN, we still have a relationship with HOTFIN. A little bit of step back is required in this instance, in that we had liquidity challenges that the chairperson referred to at some point, coupled with some operational issues in the beginning of the relationship with HOTFIN, which were in the process of being resolved. So, but once you take into account the issues of liquidity, that we were not able to fully support the requirements of their facilities as they brought applications, they also sought alternative financing partners. And in that instance, they were able to at least get their transactions supported from the alternative financial services partners. The rest of the questions, if I understand, are all related to how we provide a detailed breakdown and to essentially indicate the specificities of where the particular transactions are, so that if members wish to even do an on-site visit on some of those, they can do that. So I will pause there because I think I've covered essentially all the items that the chair had requested me to cover. Thank you, Chair of the committee and honorable members.
Thank you very much, Sydney. Before we hand over back to you, Honourable Chair, I would like to give the DG Tate Ramasodi an opportunity to respond to some of the questions that have been raised. But before you come in, DG, if you would wish, I see that the CEO would like to make some additional comments. CEO?
Chairperson of the Land Bank Board. I just wanted to make one comment, and it's really more than maybe a request to this honorable committee, and more so maybe to the honorable chairperson of the committee. On the time, honorable chairperson, you have given us to give you the written responses, which is next week, Friday. My request, honorable chairperson, is if with your allowance and permission, I wanted to ask for 10 working days. The commitment whenever we appear to appear in all the other parliamentary committees, we are given 10 working days to put together our written responses. If I look at the questions we have received from this honorable committee, I think we might need indeed, honorable chairperson, 10 working days. So I wanted to put a plea so that if we really are to give you very detailed responses, you consider that. Thank you, chairperson.
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you to the CEO, CFO, and the chairperson of the Land Bank. Unfortunately, we are not any other portfolio committee of Parliament. We are portfolio committee on agriculture, land reform, and rural development, and we work specifically on a certain time frame. So we would like these questions to be answered in full and submitted to the committee by no later than close of business day on the 19th. Honorable members, due to time, we are pressed to take the presentation of IDC. I would request those that had follow-up questions to please send them to the Secretariat so that we can send them to the Land Bank by end of business day today, so that we can get them included in the responses that will be sent to us by the Land Bank. Thank you to the chairperson as well as the CEO and the CFO and officials of the Land Bank for the presentation. Allow me, honorable members, to invite the IDC to load their presentation and they may proceed. Thank you. IDC, please proceed.
Morning, Chair. This is Bongani Mia, the Agricultural DE at the IDC. Wondering if I can be assisted in loading the presentation. This end, when I try to load it, it says it has been disabled on my end, Chair.
Secretariat, can you ask IT to assist in loading this presentation?
Permission has been granted, Chair. You can project the presentation.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and use the different link.
Secretariat, please mute your microphones.
Okay.
Been uploaded.
There you go. Let me know if you see
Yeah,
it,
now
Chair.
we can see it. You can proceed. We can see it.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. And I was hoping that our Chief Operations Officer would be here to set the tone. It does seem that she got tied up in a different meeting. So I'd like to proceed in the interest of time. Like I said, Honorable Chair and members, my name is Bongani Mia. I am the Divisional Executive for Agriculture as well as Services in the IDC. What I'd like to do today, Chair, is take the committee through the presentation in the following manner. We'll touch base on the fund mandate. I think it's important for us to remind ourselves the rules of the game, as it were. We'll discuss a little bit the fund regulations, as well as the dashboard that we use internally just to track that we are remaining true to the reasons that the fund was set up. And then we will speak to how the fund is doing, because we measure the geographical spread of the fund, of the deals that we look at, as well as share with the committee, Chairperson, our deal pipeline going forward, just to underscore the fact that this program is important to the IDC, and we are really looking forward to making it count and create the impact required. We then will share a treatment of our performance or against the Poultry Master Plan, and then we'll also share with you what we as the IDC see as medium-term priorities in trying to generally create impact given our mandate, as well as how it ties back to this fund with DALRRD. Here, Chair, I won't touch base on everything, but I think it's important to just restate the objective as understood in the agreement with DALRRD. that it is indeed to support economic growth, value chain expansion, and broad-based transformation within the agri sector. And in doing so, we will pull from both the financial capabilities of the IDC as well as the department. How we measure the fund, so key performance indicators, Black ownership. It has to be a commercial transaction that we support, and where possible, revitalize the use of old land assets under reform mostly. Industrial expansion. This also ties back to the mandate of the corporation. We then focus also on export focus crops as well as localization. By that we mean import substitution, where possible we grow our own crops and lessen the amount of volumes that are being imported. And lastly, Chair, we focus on job creation as a goal. The mandate also has a prioritized value chain where we speak to export-oriented crops as well as animal protein value. These would be the big two categories that we focus on as we assess the transactions or applications that come through. I've touched on the linkages with the IDC mandate. The fund size is a 1 billion rand in value over the next 5 years, terminating in 2026. The thinking there is that we will have 200 million per year to deploy under this program. The fund structure is an off-balance sheet structure as far as the IDC is concerned, while we originate, manage the credit, as well as administer the scheme. It is not reflected as an on-balance sheet program to us. It remains with the department. On the fund instrument, this is a grant instrument, so the billion would be deployed as a grant to enable that we close the equity gap with those that apply to the IDC. Honorable Chair, here I won't spend a lot of time. Suffice to say that for the qualifying criteria, every application that we look at has to be owned minimum 60% Black. So everything that we speak to has this as a stringent requirement to then have it be minimum 60% Black. We do look at both existing and new players into the market. We look at greenfield projects. We will share these later in the presentation. We do look at expansionary transactions for both new entrants and existing farmers. In terms of the scheme, I think what's important to highlight here, Chair, is that the IDC is always meant to co-fund on a transaction level, either through a senior debt facility or equity funding. So at no point do we finance a transaction with 100% of the department's money. So it has to be partnered with that of the IDC. One other point I'd like to highlight, Chair, is that a project qualifies for up to 40% of total project cost, and we kept that per transaction at 50 million. And so this would be true for all the transactions that we discuss henceforth. Shareholders, where the means test has been carried out, and we established that the applicant indeed has the means, we do require them to contribute towards the project. I think the principle here, Chair, is really to make sure that we can stretch the resources and create as much impact as possible. Chair, this is the investment dashboard that we use internally, and I'm happy to take members through in that. What we try and do is distill the information that we are pulled from the funds and actually have what you might refer to as a scorecard of how well we've done. So just the salient point here is that since March 2021, we've approved total funds of about 1.1 billion. Of that, the scheme, so we'll call it for purposes of this presentation AIF, which is the Agricultural Industrial Fund. So it is the department allocation. We've approved just shy of 400 million. You would see that we've received 400 million. That was in 2 tranches. So what is key takeaway in this slide, Chair, and the committee, is that we as the IDC are nearly full what was given to us by the department. We've approved nearly 100% of what was given to us, given the timeline. Of that, 190 million has been drawn upon. The reason that it doesn't tie back to the 392 that's been approved is that some of these projects that we support are actually in a construction phase. So the rate at which applicants and promoters do draw down on the facilities would vary given the milestones that they are at. So we do expect that the funds would be fully drawn. They would just differ in terms of rates of drawdowns given where the project construction stage is at. Of the transactions that we've approved, 27% of those are owned by women, Black women, I should add, given that everything is at least 60% Black in order for us to even look at it. In that time, jobs created were 845. These are direct jobs. So we don't capture the multipliers here, the people who then begin to service the businesses that we've supported. Statistically, the cost per job is about 1.3 million rands. Below, Chair, you'll see it's an attempt that we want to discuss the geographical spread of the fund, as well as the jobs created by geography, as well as the crops or products that were supported. I won't go line for line, but as you can see, from a geographical spread, KwaZulu-Natal is sitting on 28%, nearly a third, and then followed by Mpumalanga, Northwest, and the Free State. So from a geography standpoint, we're covering at least 7 out of the 9 provinces. On the jobs created, as it follows that KZN would be 472 jobs created of the 825. So that just follows the allocation of the capital in the previous graphic. And then the rest seem to be spread out quite nicely. We do look at the spread quite closely as the way of managing the fund. By product, poultry is by far the largest beneficiary sector, as well as forestry and citrus. So what we try and do is make sure that we spread also from a product category standpoint. Chair, I'll move to the next slide. This is a snapshot, the financial snapshot of what I've just discussed. So the takeaway here would be the available cash. Keep in mind, Chair, that nearly 400 million has been approved. So from the allocation from the department, we have available cash of 239, and we have approved but undrawn commitments of around 216, those 2 highlighted. So what really speaks to the fact that we are tracking quite well. We try and not have idle capital and apply it and create the impact that's desired in the market as far as possible. This graphic, Chair, we included just to give a visual, I suppose, perception of where we play. As indicated in the previous slides, we have present or have deployed the money in 7 of the 9 provinces. We are aware of the Northern Cape as well as the Eastern Cape that we have not been able to impact thus far. Chair, I need to point out that we are in year 2 of 5 So as the lead of the department or the division, we're focusing now on origination in these two provinces to make sure that we've got a equitable spread of the impact as well. So it is something that we've highlighted as a weakness in the way we have deployed the capital, but it is something that with grace, we have some time to correct in the next year or two. This slide, Chair, is really just to walk you through what our deal pipeline looks like. So as we move from top to bottom, it really speaks to the approval process within the IDC. You would recall that the administration of these funds is in line with how the IDC would naturally look at our own deals. So it follows the same process for deployment. At the top is basic assessment stage. We have about 6 transactions that are in excess of $1 billion, so $1.5 billion, that we think would have participation in the fund going forward. In the next level of approval, we have 13 transactions with a total funding requirement of about $4 billion. So, Chair, I guess the takeaway information here is really that there is a robust pipeline. We are committed to making sure that we hit the ground, we go to these rural areas and find these projects. More often than not, they do require some hand-holding, and that's what the team is postured to be able to deliver outside. The due diligence stage would be six transactions, also in the range of billions, and the AIF grant would be in the region of about 177. And then the 20 transactions that we mentioned are what has been approved, the 1.1 billion and the 292, that is the AIF grant, creating the jobs as indicated. Chair, this is in the slide, it's the poultry master plan that we try and track how we're doing against the national target. Just to navigate you through the slide, the first bar that shows 174,000, those are 174,000 tons of meat produced through the poultry sector. That is the national target. The IDC target is the 97,000, which is somewhat 50% of the national number. The actual performance is about 38,000 tons of meat thus far. In the pipeline, we have a further 14,000. We expect by closing that pipeline in the current year, we would be 54% of our target would be hit with just 20% of the time thus far. So we are tracking well in terms of the poultry master plan. About 540 million has been spent in this space. About 194 of that comes from the grant. So the grant has been very useful to stimulate these transactions, and most of which have offtake agreements with the RCLs and the country birds of the world. The next slide, Chair, we thought it'd be a useful pause for a little to just consider the risks that these funds that we deploy face. First would be just the GDP and the backdrop of our economic picture in South Africa. That seems to also have an effect on how these funds perform. What we try and do from our end is to structure for these possibilities. So we do every now and again offer moratoriums to give these businesses breathing room for them to build the business and hopefully over time be stronger and be able to service their loans. So we're quite cognizant of the reasons for failure. We try in our structuring speak to that. We also build scenario planning in our financial modeling, which is key to the health of these businesses we support. Energy supply, I'm sure every single person in the committee chair is aware of these. A few initiatives within the IDC are underway, particularly from the Energy SBU, which is primarily looking at how best to stem the problems that are experienced through the insecurity of energy supply. We as the Agri unit, we invite our Energy SBU in every transaction that we look at. So what we tend to do is that we provide in the funding for alternative power supply, like generators and solar panels and that. So these are things we try and tackle at transaction or application level. Water is a problem that we need to really get on top of. Biosecurity is a problem that I think is more national than anything else, because you would have seen with the citrus situation with the Europeans really hurting our industry because of this biosecurity question. We think there's also a positive spin to it, in that if we grow capacity of these various subsectors, be it poultry, fruit, and beef, we should be able to export. Therefore, solving the biosecurity question is quite critical for the ability of the South Africa Inc. to be able to export to the global markets. And we think some of these farmers that we're supporting should be able to participate in that value chain as well. So it is something that we look at. Chair, we also included a case study of this is a specimen, I suppose, of the sort of projects that we support, that the department has supported through our administration. Here is a mutant citrus in KZN. We funded a total of 195. 50 million of that was from the grant. It is a Black owned, as previously stated, in the Midlands, but 10% of the employees, or rather employee scheme, holds the shareholding. 10% of the shareholding is held by the employees. Chair, this is one of the features that we tend to witness in our transactions, that we do insist that the employees of such projects also get to participate on the equity basis. And the department funding really comes in handy in those discussions, because then you're able to include in the structure, in the value creation and wealth creation, people who wouldn't otherwise be able to put up the money. So it is something that we're incredibly proud of, to be able to insist in most of our transactions. Chair, this particular one, 70% of their citrus, they expected to be exported, speaking to that high value crops that for export. The project will create about 200 jobs. They've already planted, so what we funded was really the expansion. From a produce perspective, we expect that they will produce over 12,000 tons of citrus, and about over 800,000 in terms of the cartons of citrus that are exported. Case study number 2 is North Roost hatchery in Makado in Limpopo, which speaks to what I mentioned earlier about poultry having benefited the most. This is a young entrepreneur, Trevor, that came to us, and we were able to assist him. The project is 60% Black owned, once again with a 10% employee share scheme that allows people to participate and be more broad-based. The project cost was 46, and about 12.7 of that came from the grant, where he's creating 22 jobs and about 10.4 million day-old chicks per annum. Chair, from hands on, I think we thought at least it was useful to share with you what we as the IDC, away from what we've been able to put together with the department and how we've performed thus far, we thought it was important for you to have an appreciation as a committee as to the priorities of the IDC, because I think the partnership calls for that. First, so we have three big verticals. One is really an aggregation model focus that we're looking at. What we're talking about here is we need the farmers that we support to be able to participate meaningfully in the formal value chains of the food production in South Africa. So what we then would do would go to an existing FMCG business. It could be any of the big ones, RCL, Tiger Brands and the likes. And then what we do is, on behalf of our applicants, we then speak to these companies so that they can participate meaningfully in their procurement numbers. So that tends to be really big numbers that allow us to create the impact, particularly in the rural areas. Ultimately, what we'd look at, or what we really address, is the supply chain optimization, so that logistically our farmers that we support are not prejudiced by where they are, as well as the fact that they don't have scale. So we try and have the link and bridge between the market and our farmers in an active way, where we have them participate meaningfully in the procurement space. Supplier development is what I've just described, as well as the market access for our farmers. Secondly, Chair, the second vertical of our focus is what we call the protein cluster. That speaks to beef production, poultry, pork, etc. As indicated, biosecurity is something that we need to solve for, because it does hamper our ability to then take advantage of the opportunities there. Coincidentally, Chair, South Africa only exports about 4% of our beef, and from my travels, our beef is really sought after in the Middle East and those territories. So there's no reason why we shouldn't increase that, but biosecurity does become an issue when you have breakouts of foot and mouth every now and again. So it is something that we think there's huge opportunity for our small-scale farmers to participate in.
Can you conclude?
I will conclude, sir. And so the next one, Chair, is the value chain. As indicated, only 1% of the abattoirs and feedlots in South Africa are Black-owned. It is something that we'd like to improve upon and apply our capital towards it. And then horticulture, the focus is really to use old irrigation schemes to grow high-value export-oriented crops, Chair. So this is one of the key focuses of the IDC, and we hope to find transactions that the department can come along with to get over the line. Thanks, Chair. That would be all from us.
Any further input? Chairperson, CFO, CEO, any further input? If not, honorable members, let's welcome the presentation of the IDC. We'll open up now for questions of clarity or comment. Honorable Kabe. Honorable Kabe. Honorable Masipa.
Chair, thank you very much. Chair, and thank you to IDC's presentation. Really, Chair, I must say I'm very, very impressed with the way the presentation outline was conducted, sorry. Obviously, you know, the fact that the IDC was very clear about the risk of the sector in terms of what they really need. I think, Chair, the one proposal that I will definitely make is that as a committee, we need to look at the legislation around biosecurity so that we can really address the risks of the biosecurity that we have been really challenged with, especially in the animal or livestock industry. I also like their tracking mechanism, Chair, the way they're tracking their performance as such. Question of energy, obviously, I think I'm going to ask with regards to how are they dealing with applications when, for example, an applicant come to you and obviously under the normal operation will have qualified, but due to obviously this load shedding and energy challenges, you will need obviously to acquire extra funding to really support the energy supply challenges of the load shedding. I mean, your 6-hour load shedding will definitely require you to have some extra resources. The question for me really is, how do they apply themselves when they are faced with those applications? Instead of rejecting them, how do they really assist and ensure that they qualify those kind of clients? I know you spoke about the energy department that you will invite, you know, to come to your committee in terms of the decision making. But I mean, the challenge is that the costs then become too high. The affordability obviously become a challenge. How then do you really address when you are faced with those kind of situation? Chair, I also must commend them that, you know, the presentation from the IDC for me, you know, give us perspective of the food system. You know, they're trying to really address the food system, trying to also, you know, address the value chain, because these are really the questions that I was really posing earlier to Land Bank to say, you know, what is your capacity? Because these are the issues that, you know, if Land Bank really has to apply itself fully, it has to address, you know, the value chain issues and the marketing channel issues. And that did not come across quite clear from the Land Bank in terms of how they're going to apply themselves and in terms of the capacity as such. So, Chair, I think from my side, that's it. I think really from the committee, I will say that from the IDC to the IDC that I think we will have to look at biosecurity legislation so that we can really support you to really do a good work in terms of supporting our livestock or our meat industry as such. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Masipa. Honorable Baukapa.
No, thank you, Chair. I'll just join my colleagues in welcoming the presentation and make it clear that at the moment I don't have any question of clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kapa. The Honorable Matthias.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Chair. Well, I don't know what is really outstanding from this presentation. This presentation, as I went through it, like the presentation by the Land Bank, it doesn't take us anywhere. And I'm sorry, I've got no ways to find ways to complement what they have presented here, Honorable Chair. Look, Honorable Chair, in terms of the IDC selection funding criteria, they are, am I audible, Chair?
Yes, you are audible. Please proceed.
In terms of their funding selection criteria, they are saying that the applicant must be, or the business must be black owned, or it must be black ownership, of which 60% of which must be black ownership. They don't tell us what the 40% gap is left for. And what provision do they make to cover the 40% to make 100%? My fear is that the 40% is left open for predominantly white-owned applicants or companies to come in, with the risk of fronting, as you raised earlier on, Honorable Chair, that we are faced with the risk of Black people, especially farm laborers or farm dwellers, being used as fronts. Fronts for companies that are owned by white people who are known to have benefited from the past system. I don't say that it must be excluded now, but it must be deliberate policy intervention to ensure that historically disadvantaged individuals do benefit. So I've got a concern about the 40%, the 30%, 60% Black ownership and the gap that is left, and it is not explained where that 40% would come from and how is it constituted. It's also worrying, Honorable Chair, that they are also saying that whoever who applies as a Black company must be able to contribute financially towards their projects. And they are showing us a case study of North Roost Hatchery, Makadwe, Limpopo. I doubt if the gentleman or young man had that kind of funding, had that kind of capital. If he had, he would be one of the luckiest to have that kind of capital. And the worst case scenario would be if he had such a capital, it would have been raised in a form of fronting, meaning he might have been used as a front. How does the ITC mitigate all of these risks, which undermines the developmental objective of the institution, and ensure that the real intended beneficiaries do benefit and get the necessary financial support from the institute? I think they need to come even much clearer going forward. They must also be given the same time frame to provide written answers, for which we shall submit follow-up written questions between now and Monday, so that they are able to respond to such questions, Honorable Chair. I'm not really impressed at all. I think we need to invite them for a second presentation in the nearest future. Thanks, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matthias. Agbare Brett.
Dankie, Voorsitter. Chairperson, let's start with my questions are predominantly with how these funds are used and how are the candidates identified. I would like to know, for example, when a person or a farmer applies for these funds, do the IDC take into account whether this person has already had funding from the state? For example, LDS or Ilima Letsema or one of the other projects, and would that disqualify them from being assisted by the IDC? What is the opinion on that? Then I know one of their key performance indicators is the commercialization of Black farmers. But I would like to know, in terms of the farmers they do support, do they look at the scale that the farmer is? For example, large scale, medium, small scale, or subsistence farmers? And do they prioritize, for example, your medium and your large scale farmers, who would actually, it would be closer to getting them commercial in that sense? Then I would like to know, from these grants, are they grants only or are there loan options available? Are these grants repayable, or if there's loan, should that be repayable? And these amounts that have been allocated to these farmers, are they once-off amounts? Are they intermittent? Do these farmers have to hand in a business plan in terms of the money they are requesting, and then provide feedback? How is being monitored that these funds are actually being used correctly and for the intended purposes? Is there monitoring and evaluation on that side, Chairperson? And then I'd leave it at that. Thanks.
Dank u, agbare breed, the Honorable Twitter.
Thank you, Tim. Chair, I have one comment and one question. My comment is, actually, let me appreciate the presentation by Mr. Meyer, and appreciate, we need to applaud where it's necessary, when it's necessary. What he presented to us is more of a 2-year plan and what they have already done and achieved. They are very clear. Yes, Honorable Matthias is raising critical issues that needs the department to have proper monitoring.
My apologies, Honorable Twitter. Honorable Matthias, please mute your microphone. Matthias, please mute your microphone. You may proceed, Honorable Twitter.
The department needs to have a proper or intensify their monitoring in terms of what Honorable Matthias have raised of funding. But for now, honorable members, let's comment what is presented to us for 2 years with achievable goals. That's what I've seen. My concern, Chair, is on the slide of e-fund dashboard, where Mr. Mia shared with us the approved by geographics. I've noticed that Eastern Cape does not reflect, and that was from March 2021. We are in May 2023. That's 2 years now, and still no reflection of the Eastern Cape, and that is the only province that is not reflecting, which I appreciate the acknowledgement of that fact from IDC. But can you share with us what could be the problem as to why Eastern Cape is the only province that is not reflecting in terms of benefiting from your fund or your grant? So that, Chair, if there is a need of what Honorable Masipa have raised, that we assist, they assist, or the department assist some of the farmers that need assistance and the know-how of how to access these grants and funds, it can be done. It's just that one clarity, Chair, why only one province for 2 years is not reflecting. What could be the cause of that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Twitter. Honorable Montwedi.
Chair, can I lay a few issues that I would want to raise with the IDC Chair? The first issue that I want to raise with the IDC Chair is that I want to find out from IDC, how do they cater for farmers that require land in order for them to participate in any of the approved programs? I'm saying this, Chair, because if a farmer would want to go on agro-processing or any program that the IDC funds and they require land, I'm not sure if IDC is able to assist farmers with regard to acquisition of land. And if they are not, they should know that they are only setting them, the department is only setting itself up for failure by giving money to IDC for IDC to implement some of these departmental programs, because the real hunger why people are not approaching you IDC, except the fact that you are in towns, you are not in villages, you're not in the Eastern Cape, your offices are not in rural areas. It is because you are unable to assist farmers to acquire land in order for them to participate in your departmental programs. Now, another thing, Chair, that I would want to find out from the IDC is that I know the IDC has a very tedious a very tedious application process. I want to know if the IDC's application process is still as tedious as it was before, or how have they simplified their application programs such that farmers should be able on their own to be able to approach IDC, make applications, submit the business proposals there and there for farmers or any other person interested in the work that the IDC does should be able to access such applications, Chair. Now, the other issue, Chair, that I want to raise is, well, I think that Matthias covered this issue, where IDC says whatever amount they bring must be covered by an applicant's own capital. And the Minister of Agriculture normally say they want to remove red tapes. And I know Small Business Department is there, and there's a guy who was appointed to also remove red tapes by the state president. I want to know, don't you see this thing of saying people must have their own as a red tape that actually stands between farmers or anyone interested on your programs to participate in this program, because that thing closes out many people who want to be part. Don't you think you must relax and remove that red tape? Now, lastly, Chair, the presenter mentioned that they want to partner with all the irrigation scheme for planting of high value crops and I want to underline this, for export market. Now, I want to know, why are we so concerned? Well, export market, I agree, but why it looks like your focus is only on export market? Why? What programs are you implementing that must ensure that our own country, South Africans, we are food secured? Because we have got shortages of a number of things that you as the IDC can be implementing some of those programs to ensure that our charity begins at home. You are more concerned.
We've lost you, Ntate Montwedi. We've lost you. Are you still there? Are you still there, Ntate Montwedi? Honorable Marshall. Honorable Marshall.
Chair, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair, Mthembu, for giving me this opportunity, and all those who are on the platform. Chairperson, I don't have much. I don't have much questions. I just wanted to appreciate the presentation made by IDC as it's presented to us. The only small thing that the one would like to understand is the issue of is with regard to where page 6, where they talk about funds dashboard, where they talked about AIF approved by geographic spread. My problem here for me to ask this question, Chair, is that when I look at the percentages, I see Northwest and Free State, which are not doing well. And then also including the Mpumalanga, Gauteng, and part of Limpopo, although the 17%, and then the other one is, I don't know which one is this one, what 8%. I just wanted to check, when they see that this type of problems that they have, what is it that the IDC is doing when they see there is lower percentage in a certain province for them to help those communities in that area to then to can understand their programs, make sure that they help them to also apply, because it's a very important, IDC is one of the very important stakeholder in our country to help those that cannot get job in government to be given that opportunity by IDC, which will then help our people in the country. Chair, thank you very much. The question is that why is this why is this like the way it is? How do they?
Are you still there, Honorable Mahlo? Honorable Mahlo?
Chair, I am done. My question was to say, how are they going to help those provinces that are lower in numbers in terms of disbursement of the funds? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mahlo. Honorable members, any other honorable member who may wish to pose a question I've not recognized? If not, I'm covered on my side, honorable members. We'll now hand over to the IDC for responses.
Thanks, Your Excellency. I have on the call Hampi Bapela, who's the head of agriculture. So the DE, he's the head of agriculture. I'm happy that Mr. Bapela addresses some questions that I might skip, but I will try my best to address the questions as I recorded them. Chair, Honorable Masipa asked, how do we fund in light of the energy situation that we now need to cater for the additional amounts to install energy solutions? So I need to emphasize this, Chair, that we put that as part of our funding. So we don't turn anyone away on the basis that there's 100, 200,000 for the solar solution that we need to install. What we have in our arsenal as a deal team is the ability to then extend the loan maturity. So for instance, typically we might be looking at a 5-year loan, but where we think the cash flows cannot be supported due to the additional costs, we might extend it to a 7-8 year loan to enable the participant or the applicant some breathing space. So we use structuring and some benefit that we then extend to the applicant to make sure that we are able to help them. Because what matters to us is the viability of the project and make sure that they can create a life for themselves and participate in wealth creation. So I hope that takes care of that, Chair. I'll move to Honorable Matthias's question on the 60-40 split. Indeed, the 60% is meant to be Black owned, and the 40% can be white participation or any other creed for that matter. What we do, because what underscores these assessments is that we assess these transactions as we would the IDC transactions. So fronting is something that we are alive to. We do look at the agreements of the transactions themselves. We go as far as looking at the off-takers and the service providers in these businesses. So we're alive to fronting issues and people being pushed ahead without any participation, meaningful economic participation. So that is true for the general IDC portfolio, that it's something we look out for, and it's no different when we deal with the AIF disbursements. Honorable Masipa also asked the question around the means test and how we continue to ask people, as it's often termed, skin in the game. The applications that the IDC get would come from quite varied applicants. Some applicants would be what in BEE circles would be termed the usual suspects. So there are people whose balance sheet we know and are out there that also apply for these schemes. as you can see in the rules of the scheme, there's nothing that specifically speaks to, you know, the wealth of someone who's out there. So we try and make sure that the most deserving of people are able to participate, because we are cognizant of the fact that resources are not infinite. You know, so if someone is a known Black industrialist who has a balance sheet that we can perceive, we would like participation. We certainly don't turn away a youngster who has an opportunity that we think can be viable. I hope that allays Honorable Masipa's concerns there. We certainly are alive to the issues of our country and what people can afford. I'll move maybe to Honorable Tammy's questions, and I'll invite Mr. Bapela to address those. And maybe just to recap, she asked about how we identify the candidates, and if a candidate has indeed been state funded before or elsewhere in the state apparatus, do we then disqualify them on our end? How do we make sure that we fund the right scale between medium to large? Do we discriminate in terms of scale of project? And are the grants only just grants, or can they be loans too, as well as the business plan that we require from applicants? And how do we then do, which I think is an important question, how do we do monitoring and evaluation that the monies that we indeed do disperse are being used for the intended purposes of supporting these projects and creating the desired impact? Chair, through you, I'd like to invite Mr. Bapela to address those for the committee quickly. Thanks, Chair.
Dr. Bapela, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll start with the question of the criteria. The criteria is already clearly stated in the MOA with the department, but also is guided by the mandate. So the relationship or the partnership that the department is having with the IDC did not necessarily sought to change IDC mandate, but assist the IDC in actually accelerating and achieving this development. So you would have seen some of the commodities that we're covering were not, or that we're not covering were shown in the previous presentation, because there is a slight difference in mandate, Chairperson. And on the question of the commercialization, because the definition of commercialization, Chairperson, we interact with the commodity groupings, and we from time to time we educate ourselves, we familiarize ourselves to check what is considered viable, because oftentimes when there is a talk of emerging, it's almost equivalent to black. And we say, as the IDC, we say we would like to commercialize. As an example, with a poultry master plan, before IDC, we never used to fund the primary side, that's the outgrowers. We then engaged with SAPA. We ran models with them. We agreed that the commercial scale is anything from 200,000 beds per cycle. And that became the benchmark on which we started our funding, because we said we sought to create commercial farmers. And earlier on, there was a comment on are we able to track how far we've gone, because the master plan spoke of creating 50 of such. And as the IDC was saying, so far we've been able to facilitate at least 10 in a period of around 18 months. The question on the whether these funds only come in a form of grant, no. The grant, the rules of the scheme is that we cannot only advance the grants that's money from the department. Hence, it's called blended finance. So it's the real purpose of it is that it helps to enhance and help the farmers to or applicants to strengthen their balance sheet so that they can be able to take on debt, so that they can be able to expand. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thanks, Mr. Papela. I think perhaps on the monitoring and evaluation question, we do have compliance. We have back office that captures, and post-investment that captures the transactions on a same basis as the rest of our portfolio, where our applicants are supposed to submit numbers annually, and we do have technical members of our teams that visit these projects on a regular basis, as well as our technical team that sits outside Africa agriculture, but looks at the industrial capacity of every applicant. So the number of personnel that we dispatch to make sure that every transaction is successful is equal to what we might do on a mining deal or any other such transaction. So we don't treat these any differently, and the monitoring and evaluation is exactly the same. In fact, as we report as agriculture, we don't separate the two tranches. We report as everything in one footing. So otherwise there'll be an audit finding on our side, and we try to avoid those. Chair, I'd like to move on to Honorable Chet's question, which is a fair assessment. I think and it might speak to how we've operated until now, and such information and discussions do help us rethink how we are administering what we do for the IDC as well as the department. And typically what we would do is we will accept and deal with what we call walk-ins. So guys who are closer to, say, Country Bird, they know that Country Bird has a scheme, they come talk to us and stuff. So you have walk-ins where the IDC is not actively originating in areas. So that's what you're seeing in our portfolio are people who've walked in. But now that we've had time to reflect and look at our portfolio and how we've allocated the departmental funds, it is clear that a pattern is beginning to show. So what I alluded to earlier is that we now need to actively originate in these areas where there seem to not be walk-ins from those areas. And we take the point, and it is something that as the IDC we're dealing with our geographical spread on our visibility and people knowing that we exist. But I can assure the committee that I have personally been to the Eastern Cape to see if we can't revive some of the projects that are out there. So we are proactively going into those provinces. What we've seen in the past were mainly just walk-ins, and that's why the skew. So we propose that we correct the skew in what we actively do in those areas. To answer the question of whether or not there are issues we need to know of, there is, apart from perhaps maybe information sharing and being aware that the scheme exists, we're not aware of any structural issue in those provinces that we're not able to see transactions from them. But as indicated, very happy to go and originate actively in there. It is something that we are unhappy about. Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd move to Honorable Motswedi's questions on how do we cater for farm acquisitions, or I think it was framed as land acquisitions. We do. So the criteria is that we have a viable business that we can support. Like I said, if it's necessary, we can extend our exposure, it be 5, 10 years, 15 years if necessary. So nothing in our funding criteria excludes acquisition of land, as long as that is towards a viable enterprise that we can support going forward. About the TDS process, Chair, hand on heart, I have heard this a few times. We're working very hard to digitize how we do things internally. It is a really big work stream that every single one of us, a few colleagues on the line, we are working to really turn around our turnaround times. Each SBU measures how we're doing on average in terms of when we get applications and when we have a final investment decision on those. So there's continuous work, and I will not try and sugarcoat that the process has been quite tedious, but there's continuous work and we are aware of those. So we can share details on some of the work we do perhaps at a later stage. The question on export versus local. So Chair and committee, you'd recall in my presentation earlier, we did speak about the FMCG companies that can offtake products from these farms that we support or projects that we support, and those are local in nature. So what we do is say, okay, as an example, Tiger Brands wants to grow sugar beans. We then go into an area that can grow sugar beans in rural South Africa somewhere, maybe Limpopo or in the Cape. We then tie that project and offtake to Tiger Brands. So we tie those up. So that program essentially takes care of the local market. The reason we think the export market is also an important space to play in, and certainly by no means the only place to play in. It is important because a farmer sitting in rural Limpopo now earns foreign currency, which then means there's more wealth creation in that region, in that space. I mean, the prices for macadamia nuts, avocados, and all of these, shall we say, lifestyle products with, I think globally they call them superfoods. That trend is driven by the Americas, the Europeans, as well as some of the Asian nations. So the export ambition is not to the detriment of the local food security. Certainly, we think that farmers who've been able to create real wealth have also enjoyed foreign exchange, and that is where part of the wealth comes from. So I hope that deals that question. Chair, I'll move on to Honorable Mahlo's question on the geographical spread. I've touched on that when I was speaking to Honorable Chweta's question of how we ended up here. You know, it was really uncoordinated. People came in. Now that we see the skew in the portfolio, we need to be more coordinated and proactive. On the provinces that seem to have lower participation, we are actively going out there and making sure that our originating officers on the ground are really just beginning to spread. So as the head of the department, I then start giving people mandates as part of their KPIs to originate in these areas to then be able to establish whether they've met their KPIs or not. So it is something that we need to drive and are aware of, that it is a shortcoming of ours. Chair, I think I've tried to respond to all of the questions. I don't know if I might have missed any. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Baumia, and let me, honorable members, also thank Ubaba and all the officials of the IDC for their responses. Honorable members, I will now take the opportunity to invite the DG to perhaps have responses on the two presentations or give input where the department would like to make comments. But likewise, let me also request from the IDC to ensure that all the questions that were posed to them, they also send them in writing to the Secretariat of the Portfolio Committee by no later than the 19th of May, end of business day. DG Ntate Ramasodi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and to the members of the Portfolio Committee. Honorable members, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the engagements on the land bank and how they panned out. But I would like to also indicate that relating to the land bank, we are very aware of the history of the land bank, Honorable Chair, and how the land bank moved from the Department of Agriculture to National Treasury, and how the land bank is currently nursing itself back to good health. And in that line, recognizing also the Land and Agricultural Bank Act and the provisions that are being made in Section 3 of the very same Act. We are very, as a department, supporting the land bank and trying to ensure that the land bank would be able to service all the categories as outlined in the objects of the very same Act, including the areas that are around development farmers, as we would know that. And I would say that I think the Portfolio Committee was correct in terms of noting that at some stage, some of these funding instruments that we are having from the land bank were not going quite well. I have engaged with the leadership of the land bank on numerous occasions, just indicating the need for us, firstly, to ensure that the funding mechanisms that we have or funding instruments are moving quicker. And then secondly, as Honorable Montedi was indicating, also decrying the criteria that we are having. And even from our side, I think we have got to bend the candle from both sides. One, ensuring that our farmers comply, because some of the issues that are there, apart from what we may call to be a very stringent criteria, some of those are from the farmers themselves, where we have got to ensure from a department's point of view that we deal with issues around administration or of our farmers' business management skills and other issues of importance to make sure that they are application ready for that matter, because some of those areas we have identified as very important. The other side of this candle that we are having is this side that we are having with the land bank and other service providers like the IDC, to ensure that the funding that is being given responds to the needs that are on the ground. You would agree with me, Chair, that in the stage of blended finance, the influence also goes from government also to the service provider or the bank in this case, to ensure that the loans that they are giving are not tempted to be reckless loans and are compliant to the current legislation that is on the table. But we are trying to ensure that as we come to development finance, some of the areas are relaxed to ensure that once we have given the grant portion, the loan portion would also respond just to bring in the developing farmers into the mainstream. I should say I'm very encouraged with the progress that we have seen as the department from the new board. And I have got to say the work that we have done with the acting CEO then, who's the CFO, the work that you are doing with the current CEO are showing green shoots that we are very optimistic that we'll be able to deal with the issues that the Portfolio Committee had raised. On the issues raised on the IDC, I agree. The issue around the own funding that has got to go to the applicant is something that we have looked on at from a department's point of view, and we are going to be making a few proposals to the IDC, to the Land Bank, to consider other areas that we think are equal to what the person would be bringing in. In most instances, you might find that the applicant would be bringing in off-take agreements, would be bringing quite a lot of other areas that we can then take to be equivalent to what the bank is looking for, but we still have got to engage on the issues that are there. I've taken note on the issues that were raised, and I think that the camp has spoken to the issues. But what the B was talking to around the export of livestock and how biosecurity has become the liquid that we have got to look at within the sector, I fully agree. However, we also have got to understand that issues around biosecurity, especially SPS measures, as you look at them from either the WTO or the three sister organizations that are looking at that, the IPPC, the OIE, and also the TBT arrangements that we have on food safety, is that some of these are actually trade barriers. And there is a point where we have got to pause and say, at some stage, apart from just taking care of our biosecurity, we also have got to look at trade restrictive measures that are put against South African products. From those aspects, I think that these are the areas that I have identified. I have noted the issues raised by the portfolio committee on how we need to engage and how we need to be giving a presentation. Honorable Tape has indicated that there would be an invite, or suggested to the chair that there would be an invite just to have a discussion, and the department will welcome that. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members and colleagues from the Land Bank and also from the IDC and to the boards of both the institutions.
Thank you, DG, Dr. Ramasodi, and the officials of the department for your responses. And we also want to thank you for having availed yourself for this portfolio committee meeting on agricultural land reform and rural development. Honorable members, let me take this opportunity to thank the Land Bank chairperson and the officials of the Land Bank for coming before the portfolio committee, as well as the leadership of the IDC. And we have been grateful for the presentations, first and foremost, and the responses that they've shared with the portfolio committee. And we would kindly request that they ensure that they adhere to the dates that we have put in ensuring that they are able to send us written responses where they may be able to expand more length in their responses. That is all, honorable members, that we had on our agenda for the day. I therefore want to thank you all for always attending and being robust in your engagements with the presentation. We want to wish you a happy Friday. Do enjoy the weekend ahead and to ensure that you spend it with your loved ones and get some rest. We look forward to seeing you on our next meeting, which will be next week, Tuesday, the usual time, honorable members. Take care. Be well.
Thank you, Chair.
A meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Speedy recovery, May Maglo.
Bye.
Recording
No,
stop.